Good morning. We'd like the last people to please find their seats. And your cell phones, please, including mine, on silent. We hope you had a wonderful evening last night and you got some rest. It poured last night, but the clouds have cleared, especially for you. And we are now to begin the first full day of the conference. I'd like to first of all give thanks to our generous funders, the Asper Foundation, the Edison Family Foundation, the Claims Conference, and we have here Tzvi and Bar. Can I embarrass you for a moment? Please stand up. Thank you. From the Claims Conference, Genesis, and we heard Dorit Golendale last night, representing the Genesis Foundation, and of course the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs are our generous funders that helped us bring all of you to this conference. As in every planned event, there is plan A and then plan B. We're not going to get to plan C, don't worry. But there are a few things we have to move around. We have, unfortunately, the chairman of the Yad Vashem director, Avner Shalev, cannot be with us this morning. He's not feeling well. And the minister for Diaspora Affairs, Naftali Bennett, will not be with us this morning. But we have other things. And I will explain as we go along. A few words about the conference and what we want to achieve here. When the conference team, and we've been planning this for the last year, felt that in order to bring a group of educators, principals, headmasters, leaders in Jewish education throughout the world, and I might say that this is a unique gathering, probably couldn't happen anywhere else in the world. I know very well that there are principals in Australia that meet regularly. Jewish day schools meet in the United States, other places. But this is probably the only place in the world where you're all willing to come together, sit next to each other, listen, and learn from each other. In order to do that, we have a team here of translators that are translating things into French, Spanish, and Russian so we can understand each other. And specifically on Thursday, there'll even be workshops, simultaneous workshops, so we'll be sitting together with translations into different languages. When we thought about putting this conference together, we felt that the first day will deal with issues of Jewish identity during the Holocaust. How did Jews remain Jews? How did they define their identity during this catastrophic period? And we're going to hear from Professor Yehuda Bauer. We're going to hear from the head of our archives, Dr. Chaim Gertner. We're going to hear from Dr. David Zibaklein, chief historian here at Yad Vashem, on different aspects of how Jews try to preserve their Jewish identity today. Tomorrow, we decided, after learning, listening, and learning today, to have a pedagogical day. How do we translate these academic materials, the stories, the testimonies that you're going to hear today? How do we translate this into the classroom? How do we bring this to our children, to our students, using age-appropriate materials from middle school throughout high school? The last day, on Thursday, will be dedicated to issues of contemporary Jewish identity. How does it affect us today? Who are the Jews? What are the issues that we're facing today that affect our Jewish identity? Having said that, a few words about the International School for Holocaust Studies, where you're all sitting. Can I have a show of hands For how many of you, this is the first time that you're here? Okay. Thank you. Welcome again. The International School for Holocaust Studies is the vision of Avner Shalev, chairman of the Yad Vashem director. When he came here in 1993, Avner had a vision. How are we going to pass on the memory of the Holocaust, of the Shoah, to future generations? We have the largest archive in the world, 188 million pages of documentation, 430,000 photographs, about 4.5 million names in our digital collections. Chaim, I'm sorry to take away your wind. Chaim, sorry, you can repeat these things. And that's our archival collections. But how do we pass this on to our students in the fifth and sixth generation? A generation which will not be able to meet Holocaust survivors. And I've now decided to create an International School for Holocaust Studies, which we officially opened up in October 1999. We had actually an international conference in October 99. We opened up I'm going to call it the old wing. This new wing was opened up just 3 years ago, and together they are both wings, the International School for Holocaust Studies. And here in the school we have agreements with more than 60 different countries. We have more than 70 international seminars for educators from all over the world. We create national curriculums, help other countries on advising how to create Holocaust curriculums in their countries. We're spearheading online learning, including what is called a MOOC, M-O-O-C, which are mass audiences, online learning for them. We create a global network of educators in order to ensure that the memory of the Holocaust will be here for future generations. With no further ado, I'm going to introduce the head of the school, Dr. Eyal Kaminka. And the first change in the program is that his presentation, called Identity as a Capital in the 21st Century, which your senior program was supposed to be tomorrow morning, is going to be now. And Eyal came to us a few years ago. He is the Lily Safra Chair of Holocaust Education, Director of the International School for Holocaust Studies, a published author, lecturer, and educator, a former manager in organizations and leading ventures. He holds a PhD in education from Bar Ilan University, an MBA from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Eyal was the CEO of the Center of Breakthrough Thinking here in Israel, Director of the Authority for the Promotion of Employment, Higher Education, and Community, and a BT management consultant, and initiated and managed the program to introduce outcomes. I knew it was there, Eyal. Outcomes. Outcome-oriented thinking in the Israeli school system. Eyal Kaminka, Dr. Eyal Kaminka, the head of the school, please.
Good morning. Ms. Dorit Novak, Director General of Yad Vashem, Professor Bauer, Ephraim, distinguished guests, good morning, shalom, and welcome back to the second day of our conference at the International School for Holocaust Studies. Abba Kovner, a Holocaust survivor, once said in a speech at the Israeli parliament in 1981, Holocaust education is first and foremost an act of soul-searching within ourselves and with the world. and ongoing accounting. In this type of soul searching, the answers do not precede the questions. Therefore, it requires not only knowledge and cognitive perception, not only historic investigation, specific or general, not only a didactic plan. More than anything, it requires courage. With courage, I want to start this morning as I have to apologize in advance before this crowd. In my speech today, which was planned for tomorrow, I'm going to be brutally honest about the state of education in the 21st century, and honesty, some claim, does not lead necessarily to resolution. However, as American novelist Louisa May Alcott once wrote, strong convictions precede great actions. And so my words today are based on strong convictions and a need for great action. I want to take Rabbi Lau's words yesterday about identity and expand them a little bit. Consider the following family. The parents are a Jewish couple living in Sacramento, California. This is a second marriage for both. They have 3 kids, they go to shul several times a year, mainly on high holidays, and they pay their membership. They try to celebrate Jewish holidays, Passover for example, when they read from the Haggadah, and they try to donate as much as they can to Jewish causes in the community and to Israel. Their kids have bar mitzvahs and go to Sunday schools, but hate every minute of it, and eventually they stop. Years pass. One child makes Aliyah at the age of 18, joins the army, marries, and has 4 kids in Israel. The other 2 children marry secular, non-Jewish partners and live in the US. Both they and their partners are completely uninterested in Judaism, Jewish culture, or identity, and also are not interested in any other religion. They are good, hard-working people that are committed to their work, family, and community. Is this a common family story in today's American reality? What can this family tells us about Jewish identity today? In order to discuss Jewish identity, one must speak first about identity in general, the concept of identity, and some of the identity dilemmas in the 21st century, including the role of education. So I would like to dedicate this talk to identity in general, but let me mention a few things that I'm not going to speak about today, things that you already know. So first and foremost, I'm not going to talk about the chaos of the 21st century. And why is it so chaotic? For starters, it is chaotic because the pace of technological change is mind-boggling. Chaotic because social human behaviors are not keeping up with the rate of technological change. Chaotic because this century, our workplaces, education systems, culture, the public sphere, include 4 generations that compared to the past are vastly different in how they communicate and view the world. The translators are suffering. Okay. I'll try to slow down. 100 years ago, the gap between the kids and their parents in terms of language, skills, and access to information was much smaller than the distance between kids and parents today. This fact alone makes education in the 21st century one of the most confusing, uncoordinated fields of today. Our students, for example, our kids, they view information differently than we do. Their attention span is different. We call it an attention disorder, but is it always a disorder, or is it sometimes an adaptation to the bombardment of information and the lack of boundaries to accessing information? Today, they are born with and into technology that allows them to access information anywhere, everywhere, anytime, and creating a different balance between depth and breadth. We will call it distractions. They will view it as alternatives. But you already know this. You also know, probably because you are part of it, about the worldwide outcry for a total reform of the 200-year-old education systems, although no one is brave enough to overturn known structures and educational axioms, like the concept of schools and traditional classes. Any professor will agree that while the level of students' ability to access information is increasing, their understanding of complex concepts and processes is actually plummeting. Think of the implications of the memory of the Shoah. Even if students are exposed to more information about the Holocaust, are they really processing it? And if so, in what way? And speaking about the Shoah, our educational challenges are even greater since they suffer from field-specific impediments, such as the question of relevancy. Why do we need to learn about the Shoah, something that happened 70 years ago? This question resonates with youngsters today and demands an answer. Shifting narratives of memory, global trends that lump all human atrocities together, irrespective of the unique aspects of the Shoah, as a paradigm for all modern genocides. And global politics, infringing on classroom settings, alongside rising anti-Semitic forces that exploit, deny, and distort the Holocaust to promote their twisted agendas. And last but not least in our inventory of challenges, we live in a post-truth age, where students rely on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat as much as and even more than their textbooks or their teacher to both encounter and eschew facts. Memes and pictures with clever captions serve as a highly influential thought-shaping tools, as well as Hollywood movies and a growing industry of fake news, untrusted sources of information, rhetoric, superficial generalizations, and a huge mix of thoughts, opinions, agendas, together with so-called facts, assumptions, and narratives. This changes the rules of the world game, and I'm pleased to hear only recently that companies such as Google are starting to rethink their role and responsibilities in reshaping the ground rules of defining truth. But you probably know all of this because you have heard it time and time again. So here's the brutal truth behind this current state of education. There is a huge gap between what we teach and what we ought to teach. There is an enormous gap between what we teach and how we should teach it. And there is a tremendous gap between what we teach and what the students actually want to learn. Are the kids that go to Sunday schools being taught what they should be, what they want to learn in a way that appeals to them? Do students here in Israel learn what they should and gain the relevant skills for the unknown future in a language and using methods that are relevant for them? Many claim that education in the 21st century is obsolete. But learning is never obsolete. People want to learn. Students yearn to learn. But too often, not the things that the system wants to teach them. They also don't want to learn using the methods of the system, or definitely not at the pace at which it is being taught. But this is only part of the problem. Let's say that we are successful in transmitting information to the next generation. So what now? What is the role of data in the 21st century for a single human being with unlimited access to information, trusted or untrusted, or for a society as a whole? Take, for example, the decision makers of the Nazi regime 75 years ago. Did they lack information in their decision process? What is the difference between information and knowledge? These questions lead me to the following thoughts. It's not only what you study and actually know. It's also and mainly about what you can do with what you know. And more importantly, it's about what you should do with what you know. There is a big difference between can and should. And I ask you this, do students today receive enough tools to even deal with this sort of question? Are we placing enough focus on can do and should do, or only on what one knows? I'm not sure. But I do want to make 4 statements for consideration. 1, identity is part of the bridge between what one knows and what one should do with this knowledge. 2nd, people are yearning for meaning in life, and identity is part of this meaning. 3rd, as identity is part of one's search for meaning, it can be considered a capital. And last but not least, education has a central role in the building of the ecosystem of identity in the 21st century in the building of ecosystem and the identity in the 21st century. But the task is hard, since we live more than ever in a multi-identity era. Let's start with the identity as a bridge, a life tool. Part of the chaos we feel around our fast-growing society is because humans remain humans. And no amount of technology can change the fact that I fall in love, that I envy or am greedy, and also that I can choose to be or not to be tolerant of others, individuals, people, nations that are very different than myself. Heritage, memory, life story, personal and collective experiences, these are all part of who I am, how I approach knowledge, and how I make my choices. And we all know that our future is all about the choices that we make here and now, including how and what to teach our students, our future leaders. The second point, the yearning for meaning. People of all generations yearn for meaning in life. Youngsters yearn for meaning as much as adults do, although they often describe the search with different language and go about it in unique ways. Identity, as a set of qualities, beliefs, perceptions, and memories about the past and their dialogue with aspirations for the future, is part of it. Third and fourth, identity as an asset and the role of education as a building stone. It is unfortunate that the importance of identity in our hectic world is often underestimated. When governments analyze education, they usually do so from an economic perspective. How does education contribute to the GNP? What is the added value of education to society? In other words, to the economy. Some will add other elements to the calculation, such as social capital, technological capital, or cultural capital. But I want to propose a new capital that may need a careful attention in the 21st century: identity capital. Identity is an asset, an investment, a capital that can help us find meaning, make decisions, and enrich our lives. Identity doesn't mean closing our doors to the other people, ideas, and values, but if carefully shaped, it means enriching and implementing the new with one's heritage, collective memories, and culture. If built carefully, identity helps us become part of something bigger, past and future, and create a base from which to have a dialogue with new concepts and adjust to our ever-changing reality. However, in our open global network, there is an almost impossible weight between being placed on the shoulders of educators, as well as students, parents, and families. It is the struggle between being a citizen of a place, a citizen of a community, a citizen of a nation, of a people, or a faith, and a citizen of the world. There is no wonder we see chaotic election all around us. Brexit in the UK, the most contentious election in the US ever, the rise of extremists in Europe. People are screaming, enough, this is too confusing. There is too much complexity in our identity. We want to return to a core. But what is the core? People worldwide are trying to articulate their identity, and unfortunately, along the way, some of them, including some of our own brethren, are doing so at the expense of the other. The pressure of multiple identities leads people to all sorts of conclusions. Some choose their national or community identity and abandon their peoplehood. Some cling to their roots as they perceive them and forget that they are part of a greater game. Wherever the search leads, identity is a capital that needs our attention, investment, patience, and wisdom in the long run. Ladies and gentlemen, the investment is education. What is our role as educators? What is the role of Jewish education, Jewish schools, Jewish communities? The answer is not a dictate, but rather an approach, a philosophy. Think about the word literate. Can one be defined as identity literate or identity illiterate? What is an identity literate person? This is an interesting question which I'm sure may result many different answers from different people. We don't all have to give the same answer, but as educators, We must ask the question. We must wrestle with it, look at different perspectives, and offer complex and creative answers to meet the needs of today's complex and demanding reality. Identity literacy, however we define it, lies on our hands as parents and as educators in the Jewish schooling systems. It is our role to facilitate, to expose, to build bridges and lay foundations cleverly, mindfully, carefully, creatively, and in a balanced way, so our kids will be able not only to access information, but also think about what they should do with their knowledge. So where do we go from here? I've been talking about identity in general, sometimes referring to Jewish identity without really defining it. This is largely due to cowardice, I have to admit. Attempting to define Jewish identity in front of 300 people working in the Jewish education is as dangerous as walking through the minefield in the Golan Heights, since every Jew here has at least 3 passionate positions on this issue. So I'm not going to even try to walk that road. Yet the memory of the Shoah and the role of Holocaust education do of course have implications for Jewish identity, however one perceives it. Therefore, with the necessary caution, let me try, bravely, to say a few words about Jewish identity as I see it. Any identity, but more so Jewish identity, is a juxtaposition of past and future, thoughts and cultures, values and brotherhood, belonging. Many people in the 21st century lack a sense of belonging to a tribe and are constantly searching for something that many will call happiness. I will call it meaning, and a sense of belonging to a greater cause, a greater past and future, something that is greater than my own flesh and blood. As Yehuda Amichai, a great Israeli poet, once wrote, "The Jews are not a historical people, and not even archaeological people. The Jews are geological people, with rifts and collapses, and strata and fiery lava. Their history must be measured on a different scale." Professor Moshe Halbertal, an Israeli philosopher, classified Jews into 3 categories. The first are cosmopolitan Jews, who emphasize morality as the essence that Judaism has to impart to the world. Many cosmopolitan Jews see leading an ethical life and working for justice and equality at the top of the list of Jewish priorities. The second are traditional Jews who bond with the Jewish religion as they understand it, including the divine origin of the Torah. The third category are nationalistic Jews who see the state of Israel as an important component of their Jewish identity. This definition, as Shmuel Rosner writes in his recent book, Jews 7 Key Questions, create a debate, perhaps a balance, between different Jewish citizenships, between Judaism as a faith in God, a behavior, the expressed values in society, ancestry, Jewish parents, Angelic laws, the Jewish mother, a shared Jewish destiny, for example, serving in the IDF in Israel, exclusivity, does not profess any other religion, self-determination, I'm a Jew, etc. According to David Novak, an American Jewish philosopher and scholar, the modern state of Judaism has been largely shaped by the acquisition of the equal citizenship in secular nation states, the destruction of 1/3 of Jewry in the Shoah, and the founding of the State of Israel. Be as it may, as Rosner continues, Judaism today is still a covenant between different types of Jews, each of whom defines the essence of Judaism in his or her own way. It's a covenant between a diverse populace that is prepared to continue debating what Judaism is today and view themselves as the subjects of that discussion. I believe that this is the essence of our role as educators, to ensure that future generations keep the debate open, continue to argue, as the Jewish people have done since the beginning of time, about what Judaism is and where it should go from here. Our educational role is to help our students stay involved in the ever-evolving, ever-arguing game, while seeing themselves as the subjects of the Jewish discussion. To have our students stay dedicated and part of the holy Jewish covenant of debate. Now, here's a tricky thing about the term covenant of debate, which perhaps should have been the title of my presentation. A debate is always with another person. Perhaps philosophically speaking, you can debate with yourself about this or that, but if not expressed to another, the debate is meaningless. Is identity an individual capital or a collective capital? Can you have a collective identity? And if so, how can one create an identity for an entire people, especially one so divided, and how they define and perceive Jewish identity? A deep answer to these questions is beyond the scope of this talk, but I'll say only this. Personal identity is built in dialogue with the collective, a dialogue with parents and family, with friends, with community, and with the society around you. Traditional Judaism developed this concept long before today's social networks, via the concept of the minyan and the major role of congregations. These are places where one must be in dialogue with one's peers, a dialogue that helps shape one's identity. When a group of people develop their distinct personal identities through common dialogue, it builds the collective identity of a people. Judaism also emphasized since the beginning of time the importance of education as an identity-building mechanism. Even at the worst time of times, during the Shoah, the role of education was emphasized. In the midst of starvation, of the fight to survive, in a chaotic world when humanity lost to darkness, in the midst of all this, there were rabbis, philosophers, scholars, and common people that were very concerned about the identity of future generations, as you will hear from Yehuda Bauer and you will hear from Shulamit tomorrow. They were concerned about the future of Jewish identity following the disruption in the continuity in Jewish education. They were concerned that an entire generation, even if they were to survive, would have an identity deficit. This is an inspiring message for us all, a testament to the Spirit. The Shoah is an essential component of our covenant of fate, as it can teach us values, inspiring lessons about humanity, remind us of the fragility of our morals and ethics. It is the covenant of fate from our past that intertwines with the covenant of destiny, our future. And our future rests, among other things, on the fact that we are one family and share common challenges. You see, the story that Rabbi Lauz yesterday talked about, and the story that I opened with, about the American family, is very personal for me. I was the one who married the girl who made Aliyah and decided to remain part of the Jewish story, the Jewish debate about the future. We, both her and me, feel, like so many around us, the burden of the multi-identity age. But that doesn't diminish our Jewish identity. On the contrary, it enriches the debate and compels us to think, to question, to argue, to rise above the rote and the mundane. We debate the appropriate balance between the two covenants, the covenant of fate, our heritage, our history, and the Shoah, and the covenant of destiny, our future goals, our multiple citizenships, and our dialogue with the world, among them people, our brothers, whom we hold very dear. We have decided not to be part of the Jewish debate. We argue about our role in the chain of the Jewish people, our role as messengers of thoughts, collective stories, and values to the next generation. Paraphrasing the words of the late Elie Wiesel from 2002 from a speech he gave at Yad Vashem, we feel that we are their heirs, their witnesses. We are the custodians of their memories, thus of their legacy. For whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness. We argue, all of us argue and debate. We argue about arguing. In fact, we argue about everything since we all take very seriously our Jewish covenant of debate as we pass it to the next generation. And speaking of the next generation, speaking about our children, we also know that we need to invest in education both as parents and as people, since we know that the identity capital is quite different than other capitals. Paraphrasing the late Shimon Peres's words on education, a budget deficit can always be restored, but an identity deficit is very hard to amend. Thank you very much.
Eyal, thank you very much. I may add, Eyal went the whole 9 yards. He brought his entire family last night. His wife and children were here last night for the opening. Eyal, I'm giving you a compliment. And the last thing I have to tell you, Eyal, we love you. We are now continuing, and I'd like to invite Professor Yehuda Bauer. Professor Bauer was born in Prague, immigrated to mandatory Palestine in 1939. He served in the Palmach from 1944 to 1945. Professor Bauer received his BA from the University of Wales, his PhD from the University of Jerusalem. He began teaching about the Holocaust at the Institute of Contemporary Jewry, the Hebrew University in 1961. Presently, Professor Bauer serves as the academic advisor to Yad Vashem. He's a member of the Israeli Academy of Science and recipient of the Israel Prize and Prize Emet. Yehuda has written numerous books. I strongly recommend reading every single book he has written. His most recent is A Contrary People, published in 2016. Yehuda is our teacher. He is our mentor, and we are honored to have you address this audience. Yehuda.
Thank you, Ephraim. I think it was a good idea to have Eyal speak before me, because then I can build on what he said. I don't have to tell you that I agree with him. See, the Shoah is not Jewish identity, and Jewish identity is not Shoah. Jewish identity is a little bit older than the Shoah. So it's part of Jewish identity. And I think that leads me to my first point, which is that there actually is no such thing as Jewish identity. There are Jewish identities, lots of them. It wasn't always like that. But in the last 200 years, and certainly on the eve of the Shoah and during the Shoah, the interpretation of what it means to be a Jew was a question of argument and discussion. Because that, you see, is the essence of Jewish history, I think. The constant argument. Jews did not build cathedrals. Some Jewish sculptors made statues, but they are not very important, really. We are a nation of texts. Our identity is built on text, on words. The words become traditions. The traditions become identity. And on the eve of Shoah, in the late 1920s and early 1930s, the situation was not that much different from that which obtains today. Jews argued with each other the way they had argued ever since the Jewish people began to develop as an entity. I mean, consider this. We didn't have one state in antiquity. We had two. They couldn't agree with each other. They fought with each other. They went to war against each other. We didn't have one Talmud. We had two. The one, they couldn't quite agree with each other, could they? And then the content of the Gemara, after all, is discussion, where some kind of conclusion is reached. But the minority view, which was not accepted, is there. There's a constant discussion, constant argument. The same as things go on in Jewish history, certainly in the early modern times. And then the violent, often physical argument and fight between different interpretations, Hasidim, Nagdim, within the Hasidic fold, within the other fold. And then between that and modern attempts at a different interpretation, liberal, secular, and so on. And one didn't recognize the other as being legitimate. Now, these differences were there. And I want to concentrate mainly, as I talk about Jewish identity in the Shoah, on the East. You see, of the 5.6 to 5.7 million victims of the Shoah, 3 million were Polish Jews. In 1939 there were 3.3 million Jews in Poland. And 3 million of them died, were murdered, were killed, were tortured, starved to death, and so on, disappeared. Over half. And the Jews in the Soviet Union, again, 2 million, 2.5 million. They formed part of the victim people. Whatever the exact number is, and we don't really know the exact number, 1.5 million or so. Now compared with the West, the South, the North of Europe, there is simply no comparison. Romanian Jews, Hungarian Jews, yes. So East, Southeast, if you like, those are the main areas that we have to discuss when we discuss Jewish identity during the Holocaust. So you have these differences, very clear differences, very unclear differences. And then identity isn't just your communal identity or your relation with the communal identity. You are not only in your own mind a Jew, you are also a mother or a father, a child, a daughter or a son, or a granddaughter, a grandson, or a grandmother and grandfather. That's your identity, no less. Your identity may also be your profession, to which you devote much of your time, perhaps most of your time, perhaps almost all of your time. That defines your identity. So identity is a very complicated thing. And then there is this issue of change, of constant change. I said that the identity, Jewish identity, at the beginning of what we know as the Holocaust. I mean, the term Holocaust, of course, is the wrong term. We all know that. I mean, Holocaust means the whole world, whole burnt offering to the gods. Nothing to do with what happened to the Jews in World War II. We use the wrong term constantly. I do too. I mean, I talk about the Holocaust. The Shoah is a little bit better, not very much better, because 13 times that it's mentioned in the Bible is in different ways. Not all of them really dealing with the destruction of human beings in large numbers. But there is that situation where it is both parallel in a way to what is happening today and yet somewhat different. Let me make this clear with a number of examples. You had a radical change in Polish Jewry between the end of World War I and the beginning of World War II. At the beginning, in the 19th century, the traditional way of looking at oneself as a Jew was still the primary way. It was defined by religion, or rather perhaps religious customs. See, there's a wonderful story of one of the founders of the Israeli labor movement, long before there was an Israel. His name was Ber Locker. He was one of the founders of Jewish trade unions in Palestine. And when he was a young man in Russia, in what is actually Ukraine, in Odessa, in a shtetl not far away from Odessa, there was this young girl whom he courted. And the way she told it, many years afterwards, he came to her shtetl to see her, and her grandfather was the rabbi of the shtetl. So he called the young man. He wanted to know who this fellow was who was courting his favorite granddaughter. And he said to him, und Tfillin legt ihr? And do you lay tefillin? So the young man, you know, a revolutionary, answered him with great courage, you know, open shirt. Ich glaub nicht in Gott. I don't believe in God. So the old man said, who asked you? I asked you whether you laid tefillin, not whether you believe in something. There is, you see, this practical side. It's not what you believe in that is really the important thing. It's what you do, what you act. And that was the way, really, Polish Jewry developed between the two world wars. Very radically, because of the impact of the modern world on Poland. In 1938-39, there were elections in Jewish communities in Poland. And an American Jewish academic historian, Joseph Marcuse, analyzed the results of these elections. 38%, the plurality, voted for the Bund. The Bund was a socialist, anti-Zionist, anti-religious party with the idea of joining forces with the Polish Social Democrats to create a social democratic regime in Poland. 35% voted for the mutually opposing Zionist parties. They hated each other, couldn't agree with each other, but 35% voted for all of them together. 23% voted for the Aguda, the political arm of the Haredi movement in Poland at the time, and for the various organizations of merchants and craftsmen and so on that were allied with them. So 38, 35, 23. They didn't talk to each other. There was no way that the Bund would talk to the Zionists, and no way that the outer religious would talk to the Bund. Now, was there? It was a violent fight. The big cities, 38, 39, Warsaw and Lodz, now had, in the Jewish communities, which were defined as religious communities, a majority of Bund is anti-religious. And of course, it didn't really gel properly because by the time something could happen, the war broke out. So, what exactly was the identity there? There were, as I said, identities. Now, there is an apocryphal story. It's obviously invented, but it's a beautiful story. It's about a Jewish tailor in a small shtetl in Poland who gets up in the morning, lays his tefillin, prays the shachrit, and then goes to work. Because he's to, keep his family. So he works. He works until lunchtime, and then he goes with the blue-white box to collect pennies for the Zionists to buy land in Palestine. And then in the afternoon he joins a Bund demonstration against the rabbis. Now, there is something to the story. And I'll tell you another story which I think puts this in real proper perspective. It's a story which is in the Yad Vashem archives, basically. I know, basically, it's there. It's the story of Zalman Gurevich from a small East Polish shtetl, town of Western Belarus. Now, Zalman was a partisan during the war, and then survived, came to Israel after its establishment, and in the 1950s provided his testimony to Yad Vashem. So the interviewer asked him, at what point did you join the partisans? So Zalman said, well, I was a member of a left-wing Zionist socialist party, but a youth movement. I was 17 years old. My mother was a communist. My father was an observant Jew. So, of course, on Shabbat, we went to shul, to the synagogue, because we respected and loved our father and our husband. And when she said, the interviewer said, but when exactly were you called to go to the partisans? Oh, I remember that exactly. A member of our movement was a contact between the partisans in the forest, already organized, and the shtetl around to recruit young Jews to the partisans. The partisans were commanded by a very pro-Jewish commander, not very common, but that was the case. And Zalman says, she came to me on Friday night after my mother blessed the candles. So think about it. Friday night, there is a traditional Jewish meal. And before that, there is the mother, the communist mother, who blesses the candles, and the son who is devoted to his Orthodox father, but who is a Zionist socialist, and goes on Friday night to join the partisans. Now, you see, identity then is a little bit complicated, isn't it? Where does this come from? Who actually are we as a people? We are a people whose traditions are built on text. We are people of text. Those that survived the ages, and those that didn't survive, and those that survived but were not included in the canonic text that was transmitted later on. And the texts, as I said before, are constantly contradictory. And that's great, really, isn't it? Because it's unity in complexity. Complexity, there is something common there. There is something common there. But it's hidden by constant disagreements. Let me say something, and I see there somewhere, you know, when you sit here, you don't really see the public, but I can make out Ilya Altman somewhere in the audience. So he will excuse me if I sort of distort the history of Soviet Jewry in a few sentences. Because the communists, the Bolshevik Revolution, as far as the Jews were concerned, was really very contradictory in itself. Stalin's first basic text he wrote in 1912 was about the national question, Marxism and the national question, and it was actually devoted to an argument against the Bund, because the Bund was a national movement. Yeah, social democratic and so on, and unity of all proletarians and all that, but Jewish, Yiddish. And so the argument of Marxism, of Soviet Marxism, was in essence, and Lenin followed suit, against the Jews, against Jewish national identity. But there were millions of Jews in the Soviet Union, and many of them supported the Bolsheviks. And in the Bolshevik leadership, there were Jews who were non-Jews, I mean non-Jewish Jews, including who later became Stalin's brother-in-law, Lazar Moiseyevich Kakanovich. Yes? But there were others as well. And so there was a Jewish section in the Soviet Communist Party to attract Jews to Bolshevism. And it was not unsuccessful. The young generation, contrary to their parents very often, did accept Bolshevism in the 1920s and early 1930s, although the parents and many, many Jews, most Jews, actually became second-class citizens because they were bourgeois. They were traders or craftsmen who employed others, so they were what was called in Russian lishency. They were second-class people. And then, well, what do you do with them? Well, ultimately they would disappear, they would assimilate. But in the meantime, they were there. And so slowly the idea developed that there should be a recognition of some kind of this Jewish mass of people. And with the help of the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, the JDC, the Joint, which helped the Soviets develop agriculture, by the way. There was a sort of an agreement, a development. The president of the Soviet Union, who was a completely powerless person, Kalinin, was actually quite friendly. And so autonomous areas developed in the Ukraine and the Crimea, and then later on in Birobidzhan. The Jews didn't flock to Birobidzhan as the Soviets wanted to. There was nothing to look for there. Swamps and mosquitoes and so on and so forth. It was much easier to live in Moscow or Leningrad, today Petersburg, and so on. But the identity was there. The Jewish identity was there. And the Soviets had this complex thing. In the end, they should disappear. They were not really a nation. They were not really an ethnicity. They were not really something that would... There was remnants of religion and psychology and so on. And this contradiction then acts out in the Holocaust, where, for instance, the Soviet partisans were the only ones that offered some kind of hope for rescue for Jews who fled from ghettos in the areas where there were partisans. Belarus, basically northern Ukraine. There was lots of anti-Semitism in the Soviet partisan movement. But they were the only ones who rescued Jews as well. One of them has been recognized by Yad Vashem as the righteous among the nations. General Chernyshev, known as Platon. So you see there's this contradiction there. And the Jews became in the 1930s, those who identified with the Soviet regime, less and less enthusiastic about the Soviet regime. And the Jewish identity was suppressed. But it was there. Which explains why when the Soviet Union collapsed, it rose again. It rose up again. Because it had been there all the time, only it couldn't express itself. And the ones who supported the Communist Party, the Soviet regime, slowly saw that it wasn't really what you expected it to be. Now, under the Nazi regime, there was no longer a question of Jewish identity because it was now forced on the Jews, whether they liked it or not, in its Nazi version. National Socialism had no problem in defining Jews. It defined them actually, on the face of it, racially, in actual fact, religiously, because a Jew was a person with 3 Jewish grandparents. If he had only 2 Jewish grandparents and was in Germany, that was a sort of in-between situation. I won't go into this now. In the East, especially in the occupied Soviet Union, people who had one Jewish grandparent were considered, both by the collaborators and by the Germans, to be Jews, and were in most cases killed. So there's a difference. But it was imposed by others, not what you felt, but how you were defined by your enemy. In Germany, when the Nazis came to power, there was a group led by a man called Naumann, a Jew, who founded an organization called National German Jews, who wanted to join the Nazis, who offered the Nazis Jewish support, 5,000 people approximately. And had the Nazis not been based whole National Socialism is based on anti-Semitism, Jews would have joined it. German Jews would have joined it in the name of patriotism. Jewish identity was there, but it was part of a general idea of a national German identity. That was true in Germany. That was true in large part in France. It couldn't have happened in Poland or the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, Jews had identity cards that defined them nationally as Jews because of that contradiction in communist politics. There was no such thing as Jewish Poles. There was a small group of intellectuals who wanted to become Polish. Some of them converted, some of them didn't. That's a marginal thing. There was no such thing as Jewish Poles. There was no such thing as Jewish Germans. Not even with the liberal anti-Nazi Germans. Not even with the communists in Germany. Jews were Jews. Germans were Germans. For the most liberal Germans, Jews were respected members, were respected citizens of Germany. Jewish perceptions in Germany were quite different. We are Germans of the Jewish faith. The central organization of German Jews, the Zentralverein, the central organization of German citizens of the Jewish faith. That's what it was called. The Jewish perception in Germany was, we are Germans of the Jewish faith. German perception was, you are German citizens, equal with all the others, participating in our, but you're Jews, we are Germans. In Poland, this was even clearer. Jewish Poles did not exist, no such animal existed. Today, you see, this is very difficult for Americans, for instance, to understand. Because in America, you can have a complete Jewish identity or a Jewish American. Because it's a different situation. It's a multi-ethnic society. And so the Jews are one of the groups, refined ethically, religiously, who cares? But they are part of the general society. Not with everyone, certainly not. But overall, yes. It's the same with some other multi-ethnic countries. The same in Canada, the same in other places. It was not so in Germany. It was not so in Poland. It was certainly not so in Hungary, where again, as in Germany, Hungarian Jews overwhelmingly, even the Orthodox, saw themselves as Hungarians of the Jewish persuasion. Now, Hungarians didn't see them like that at all. For them, a Jew was a Jew, a Jew was a Jew, a Jew was a Jew. Finished. He could have been a wonderful Hungarian patriot, but he was a Jew, not Hungarian. After all, the great Hungarian hero of 1848, Kossuth, was actually a Slovak, not a Hungarian. So, you have a situation then developing in the Holocaust itself. Especially, as I said, in the East. I have to stop soon. I don't have a watch on me, so where's Ephraim? Ephraim will have to scream. How much? 5 minutes? See, there was in the most terrible situation, in Poland, in the ghettos, in the destruction. Identity collapsed too. Let's not pretend that everybody was a hero, that everybody maintained her or his identity under the most terrible situations. There was despair. There was yielding to despair. There was no hope, and there was no hope. There was no way that the Jews could have been saved. Not by Americans, not by British, not by Soviets. Because they were under German control. Nobody could help. And Jews were aware of that. And so many Jews, for them, Jewish identity no longer had any meaning, because they were humans who were destined to die. But there were others. There were others who said, if we have to die, at least let's die as who we are. And we are humans, and we are Jews. And we will die as humans and as Jews. And there are plenty of cases where one can show that. Not only people with religious traditions, they too, certainly. People with non-religious, Jews with non-religious traditions. And on that, really, we have not yet written sufficiently. We have not yet identified sufficiently. So is there a Jewish identity? Was there Jewish identity in the Holocaust? It was imposed, but in large part, it was also something that Jews felt and expressed. Jewish identity, then and later, is important. But it depends on what you do with it. And this is where I join with Eyal Kaminka. It depends what you do with what you have. Are you going to be exclusivist, concentrating on yourself, looking at Jewish identity as something better than somebody else's identity? Or are you going to say that there is an orchestra in the world? Jews are small people. Small people, 11 million, 13 million. We play a piccolo, a small. It has a certain quality, the piccolo. It has a separate quality. But the separate quality can join in harmony with the other instruments. Doesn't depend only on us, but we have to be ready to turn what we have, and we have got so much. This textual civilization is really tremendous. And offer it first to ourselves, but no less to others, because the Jewish history takes us in its best elements into that direction. Thank you.
Yehuda, thank you for your inspiring words. We wish you long life, mucho health. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a break until 11 o'clock.